easy.
They just hold people, and it's just, I like warriors. They aren't warriors. They're just martial artists that are doing good because they're inbred. Sit there on a cliff, f each other's cousins, teaching them how to grapple at birth. They're going to ruin the whole sport, straight up. They're going to ruin the whole sport. And sprout another one out. Whichever one doesn't have 5 limbs, they teach them how to grapple. If it has 5 limbs, throw it off the cliff, try again. Yes! Yes!
Women and Dagestanis, the two types of fighters that everyone hates. At first, the hate may have been somewhat deserving. American fans, having been used to UFC stars mainly banging out on the feet and only grappling for short periods of time, were somewhat jarred when Dagestanis first entered the scene because, to their defense, yes, many of those fighters did mainly use their grappling skills to hold down opponents and rack up decision victories. However, with the rules being changed and fighters from that region of the world having adjusted to those rules and diversifying the styles of fighters that are reaching UFC, the hate is not comprehensible by any logic at this point. What hate am I talking about? The hate of MMA fans from the Western Hemisphere of the world who will find any reason to pile on the fighters from the Caucasus and sometimes Central Asia as well. Today we will look at why these fighters, along with female MMA fighters, may be the most hated amongst MMA fans, and if it is warranted or not based on common tropes that are used to hate on these fighters. They are boring leg huggers and wet blankets. This may have been true during the initial wave of these fighters in the early 2010s. Yes, they used their grappling pedigree that stems from combat sambo and freestyle wrestling in order to secure victories, but that is also due to the fact that the scoring criteria was slightly different back then. Takedowns and control time counted for more than they do now, as judging has switched to the effective grappling and damage-based criteria. Khabib, being one of the pioneers of the wave of Dagestanas in the UFC, perhaps did take safer routes in order to solidify himself and his nation in the organization at first. In his first 10 fights, he went to the decision 7 times and finished the fight 3 times. However, after securing the belt, and as more Dagestanis started to get signed to the UFC, that all quickly changed. Khabib, after capturing the belt, never went to the decision afterwards and finished his career with 3 straight finishes. We also saw literal Kung Fu, or you may know it as Wushu Sanda masters, from Dagestan get signed as well, such as Zabit Magomed Sharipov and Muslim Salikhov. These two frequently delivered striking highlights. Currently, the situation is much different. Umar Nurmagomedov, while having his grappling pedigree, is also an artist when it comes to kicks. Islam Makhachev knocked down and submitted Charles Oliveira to get the belt, and then recently head-kicked Volk into Shadow Realm to defend his title. Magomed Ankalaev has more finishes than decisions on his record, and we literally have a Tekken-style fighter in Shara Bullet Magomedov. What's interesting with Shara Magomedov is that even though he won his UFC debut and even did something crazy like land a 3-strike combo of kicks and an elbow from the ground, he was criticized for, wait for it, not having grappling skills to defend takedowns.
His first fight in the UFC, I don't know how he's from Dagestan and has 0 takedown defense, but...
So when in past the fans would hate on Dagestanis by saying they're just not man enough to stand and bang when a Dagestani that refuses to grapple appears, now the tune that is being sung is, dude, what the hell, you're from Dagestan, why can't you grapple? Weird, isn't it? Now this sudden increase in striking finishes has led these haters to present a new trope of, they're all juicing bro. Now this one isn't necessarily wrong. There have definitely been fighters from that region that have been caught in peculiar circumstances regarding USADA. However, the problem with this argument is hypocritical. These same fans do not put an asterisk to John Jones's status of being GOAT, despite multiple doping violations. When Paulo Costa, who the fans are almost surely convinced that he is juicing, plays around with the topic of doping with his secret juice meme, not only is he not criticized, he is praised for it, and everyone runs along with the joke. Imaging if Islam Makhachev ran around with secret IV thing as a meme or a joke, he would be crucified. This crowd did not use doping against Brock Lesnar nor Uberim and is currently not that agitated at UFC's attempt to allow Conor McGregor back into competition while clearly being on steroids, hence the UFC's breakaway from USADA. Dan Hooker has been going on about Islam Makhachev and IV for years now, but never questioned his teammate Israel Adesanya's gyno, the double standard strike once again. So when that doesn't work, what's the next excuse? The next excuse is that they're all inbred, hence they have more inbred strength? For any myth to work, it needs to have an element of truth. This one does have an element of truth, but it is just that. Only an element. First of all, most of this segment of the MMA fans doesn't know that Dagestan isn't an ethnicity, but a home to many ethnicities. Some ethnicities, such as Avars, from whom Khabib descends, do indeed practice cousin marriages. However, other ethnicities like Kumyks, Ingushs, or Chechens do not practice at all. Some of the Kumyk fighters from Dagestan are Muhammad Mokaev, Nasruddin Imavov, and Abus Magomedov. Kamzat Chimaev is the most famous Chechen fighter, and Movsar Evloev is Ingush. If inbred strength was the reason, then these fighters I just mentioned must lack it, yet they're still successful. This argument further falls apart when you look at the statistics on inbreeding in the world. The countries that currently lead the world in cousin marriages, such as Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, and Jordan, are currently not dominating the MMA world. There hasn't been a UFC champion from any of these countries. When we look at Central Asia, cousin marriages are only practiced in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, while they are extremely taboo and looked down upon in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. This has not given any advantage to Uzbek and Tajik fighters over Kazakh and Kyrgyz fighters, and currently the highest-ranked Central Asian fighter is Kazakh. Speaking of Central Asians, it's funny how they're actually better received than Caucasus fighters with memes like prehistoric humans and warrior of Genghis Khan's army, yet as soon as a big name such as Shavkat has a fight that is considered boring, which he still finished with a submission, by the way, against Wonderbody Thompson, many of the fans began throwing the same accusations against him. They said that he's inbred, is scared of striking, and is a boring grappler. As a final note, northeastern Brazil, which is impoverished and produces a lot of the MMA fighters, has a pretty high rate of cousin relationships as well. I quote, "While the frequency of consanguineous marriages is at its lowest in the state of São Paulo and southeast Brazil, less than 1% of all unions. Rates as high as 6 to 12% have been recorded in rural areas of northeast Brazil." Freire Maia, 1957. In most of the surveyed villages reported here, the inbreeding rates were much higher, some of them ranging from 20% to 30%. Yet the Brazilian fighters' success is never predicated upon some of them potentially being inbred. Now that we have established that most of the hate received by those fighters isn't logical or credible, let's determine the source from which this personal dislike comes from. For older generations, it may definitely stem from the Cold War days and a general opposition to Russia added in with characters like Ivan Drago from Rocky. The problem is that in the movie, Rocky finally overcomes Drago, but in reality, many of the American fighters haven't been able to do so. Now, of course, this is nonsensical, as the majority of those fighters aren't even ethnic Russians and could care less about the Cold War, but never underestimate the low education of MMA fans. As for the younger generation that does not have the same attachment to that dichotomy of the Cold War times, it could have started with the Khabib and Conor rivalry. This is the first time we've seen MMA fans so clearly divide themselves. Perhaps Conor is more inspirational to young men in the Western Hemisphere because aside from achieving success as a champion, he also shows off a lavish lifestyle where he frequently buys luxury items, parties often, has tattoos, and is having his pick of women regardless of being in a relationship or not. This coincides with the work hard and play hard attitude many have in the Western Hemisphere. Champions like O'Malley and Volk, in a sense, are also of that mold, though with Volk, I believe he balances it out very well. The Dagestanis, in contrast, aren't seen partying, do not have tattoos, and the only high-life enjoyment they portray publicly is traveling and eating. Aside from that, they show a strict discipline of praying 5 times a day, training, and not indulging in alcohol or drugs. Therefore, the fans would like to see someone like an O'Malley or Conor prevail over these types because then that would give them the confirmation that, yes, you can train and party and live the high life and still be on top. And when Dagestanis defeat those types of fighters, it crushes their fans because it gives them harsh reality that most of the times when all things are equal, the man that is more disciplined will simply win over the one that parties, drinks, and does drugs.
Khabib is a strict Muslim. I believe in the power of Allah. Train Allah, train Allah, train Allah. There's nothing else to his life. Do you want to go and spend millions of dollars? No. Do you want to go club? No. Do you want girls? No. Train and Allah. That's it. How the fuck are you gonna beat that guy?
Now that is not to say that Dagestanis are holy and do not partake in those actions as well. Anyone familiar with the Russian pop MMA scene knows there are famous fighters like Rasul Mirzaev, who is a habitual nightclub resident, and Zalik, who is a serious abuser of bath salts, by the way. You can check out our video on Rasul Mirzaev's compelling story here. However, these fighters have never made it to the UFC and therefore aren't seen by majority of the English-speaking MMA fans. Another reason can definitely be ethnic, racial, and religious. Many Westerners have an overly simplified view of the world and create boxes in their head to put people in. Dagestanis being literally from the Caucasus, therefore being white, yet at the same time being staunch Muslims and representing Russia most likely causes a malfunction in the brains of many trying to understand them. In this sense, fans that are Islamophobic can direct hate against them. Fans that believe in racial superiority also do not like the fact that these guys are dominating. What's funny is that it can come from both white and non-white supremacists. As someone who believes that the Western white race is superior, the Dagestanis rub them the wrong way due to being Muslim and from a region they don't know about. It's almost as if they are somehow traitors for being Muslim and not sharing their worldview. They must see the Dagestani and Daniel Cormier friendship and fume about things like that. As for someone that may believe in black supremacy, seeing physical and athletic Dagestani champions who are literally from the Yakubian Caucasus Mountains also rubs them the wrong way, as they shouldn't be able to win so easily in those people's views.
I would never let a white boy beat me. I will never lose to a white boy in my life. I don't care what nobody got to say.
The people they consider white are oftentimes fragile, wealthy, and sheltered, as their worldview is solely based on what they see in America. Therefore, seeing that people who are literally from the Caucasus oftentimes come from impoverished circumstances and lived through wars or insurgency in their own generation, and are therefore not sheltered nor soft in any way that also breaks their view of the world, and as a result would generate hate towards them. Now, I don't think Dagestani fighters are as hated as female fighters, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole another day.